Well, that certainly is a challenge. But I'm sure we're going to hear another compelling story. Corey was involved with the Church Universal and Triumphant for probably almost about 3 years. 2 years, I guess she would describe it as having been under mind control, and she puts it officially listed as a member for 8 months. Her family is going to tell you their story. Come on up.
And this is a very tough act to follow, especially since we are pinch hitting for another family. So you are actually going to see family interaction the way that it is in the Slavin family, because we're probably going to disagree on a lot of things. There are, however, many factors that we definitely do agree on. And before I start, because I probably will forget to say this, without my family, I definitely would not be here. And there's one person who's significantly absent from being up on this podium, and that's my younger brother, Kevin. However, we were originally scheduled to be on the sibling panel this afternoon, and so we will be doing that. So you'll hear another aspect of the story, and I'm trying to keep them separate. So we'll see how well I do at this. I'm 30 years old, and I grew up in LA, always with a very strong family relationship. My family was always close. We took vacations together all the time. Of course, we had the usual fights with my brother and with my father, and my mother was mostly the typical mother-daughter things where we pushed each other's buttons very well, and I couldn't even tell you what we ever were fighting about. And when I was 25 in 1988, I was going through a lot of vulnerabilities, and I got recruited by a friend of mine into the Church Universal and Triumphant. And I think really for me, that's where this story begins, because that's where, when my personality changed, when my relationship with my family changed, and the other thing is what was really important in my recovery and in my getting out of the cult was my first year out of the cult, and I think that's what we want to focus on too, because that's where we really did a lot of reintegration and reuniting of the family. So I'm going to turn it over to my parents.
I think the thing I would like to say first is that when Corey first was in a cult, when she first joined the cult, we were out of the country, and I called home from London to say, hello, how are you? We're going to be home in a week. And after I hung up, I said to her, something's wrong with Corey. She's not the Corey I knew. And when we came home, he didn't believe it, but I thought she was either on drugs or in a cult. And I confronted her, and this was the wrong approach. And until we found a cult clinic in Los Angeles and talked to I don't know how many people all over the country on the phone, we blew it in our conversations. I always was accusing, and she was fighting back. But they taught us how to talk and how to try to get a relationship going. Do you want to say something?
I do.
Okay.
Do you want to say something?
No,
I do.
Well, except...
See, I told you.
No.
Go ahead, Danny.
No, I have nothing to say. We've covered all that.
What I want to say about this whole thing is that what was going on the other end, what the cult was doing to me, was they were telling me that my family didn't love me, that they didn't understand me, that they weren't my true family. CUT believes very strongly in reincarnations, and it was told to me that this was my test in this embodiment was to be able to separate myself from my family. They told me that I wasn't loved unconditionally, that my brother had been favored, and all of these things. And I remember distinctly when my parents called me, by this point when my parents were away and they called from London, I was really not answering the phone very much because I was trying not to speak to them. And I do remember the conversation that we had that wasn't much of one. But I remember being very belligerent and rude and not happy to speak to them. And you know, frankly, I didn't really care if they ever came home or not at that point.
We'll let you.
Since we got back on this conversation, the phone call from London, when Judy said something was wrong, I said, no, there's nothing wrong. She's maybe maturing a little and growing up and things like that. And one thing I want to mention here is I found out afterwards, for some reason, the mother seems to be more aware of what's going on than the father. I can't explain that. That's true in other families.
Yay! I did to Molly.
Oh, when Corey was in the cult, we have this wonderful dog named Molly, and when Corey was in the cult, she said that that dog was the most ill-behaved, ill-mannered, horrible beast that I had not trained properly, and she wanted nothing to do with it anymore. Well, after we went through exit counseling, while we were out of the city, that was the first thing she wanted was to see Molly. So we knew then that things were better. But I think it's better to just tell about Corey's coming home. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. Okay, I went through an exit counseling, and the significant thing about that, my whole family was there for that, and it was very important in terms of getting me out of the cult. I think my exit counseling, I mean, I have a lot of similarities with the Grosswald story. I think there's some differences. My exit counseling, really the important thing to me was, the first thing that I was told about it was that Cut was anti-Semitic, which is obviously something that if I had known that up front, I would have never gotten involved in the cult. And so for me, having access to information that I had not obviously had when I was getting recruited and during my indoctrination was a critical part of it. And I remember when I started, I asked for Molly after I asked for my mother, because I went through this whole big period where I started crying during the exit counseling. And, you know, I needed my family support a lot, and I remember just hugging my mother for a long period of time, and it occurred to me, I think, at that particular moment that what had happened was, first of all, I felt like I had lost 2 years of my life. When people asked me how old I was, instead of saying 28, I said 26. And inside, I really felt like a child. I felt like I didn't know what I believed in anymore. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what I liked anymore. There was a lot of insecurity. I really felt like I was beginning to grow up all over again. I felt like I had abandoned everything that I had ever believed in, wanted, goals, all of that. And when I came back to LA, I hadn't really nowhere else to go, and it's what I wanted to do anyway, was I moved back home and lived with my parents for the first year, and this was a very significant period of time. I was going through therapy at the time in the cult clinic at Jewish Family Service. I got involved in a support group for former members there, and I needed a lot of support and nurturing and love. My father had to get all my old stuffed animals out of the garage because I couldn't sleep at night without them. And there were many times that I had nightmares in the middle of the night, and I couldn't sleep alone in my bed, and I would have to get up and go into my parents' room and stay with them because I just needed that nurturing and that support. And is there anything else that you want to